Thank you so much for watching Landumc Goes There. Please subscribe and hit the like button and the bell notification button. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid is a 1973 revisionist Western film that was directed by Sam Peckinpah. The story was written by Rudy Wurlitzer, and it stars James Coburn, Chris Christopherson, Richard Jekyll, Katie Girardeau, Chill Wills, Barry Sullivan, Jason Robards, Slim Pickens, and Bob Dylan. The storyline is one that we know pretty well. It's that of Sheriff Pat Garrett, played by James Coburn, and he's ordered by Governor Wallace, who's played by Jason Robards, to go after the outlaw Billy the Kid, that's played by Chris Christopherson. The cattle businessmen just flat out want him caught. Although Garrett and Billy are very old friends, the lawman must abide by his duty. But Garrett and his deputies have a pretty tough time catching Billy, who is extremely cunning. Along the way, Billy also gains the assistance of Alias, played by Bob Dylan, who's a mysterious knife-wielding stranger. The director Peckinpah believed that this was his chance to make a definitive statement on the Western genre and complete the revision that he had begun with Ride the High Country from 1962 and The Wild Bunch from 1969. The screenplay for the movie was written by Rudy Wurlitzer, and it was originally intended to be directed by Monte Hellman. The two had previously worked together on the acclaimed film Two-Lane Blacktop from 1971. Working with Wurlitzer, Peckinpah and he rewrote the script in order to create a more cynical narrative and to add a prologue and epilogue depicting Garrett's own assassination at the hands of the men who hired him to kill Billy the Kid. In the original script, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid never met on screen until the film's conclusion. The famed director initially considered Bo Hopkins for the part of Billy, but he eventually cast country music star Chris Christopherson as the outlaw. Christopherson was 36 when the film was made, and this was a bit of a problem for a lot of critics because he was playing 21-year-old Billy. Christopherson's band would play small roles in the film, along with his wife, Rita Coolidge, who's a little more prominent, and she's pretty easy to pick out. Christopherson also brought Bob Dylan into the film. He was initially hired to write the title song. Dylan eventually wrote the score and played the role of Alias in the movie. Peckinpah had never heard of Dylan, but he was reportedly so moved by hearing him play the proposed title song that he hired him immediately. Among the songs written by Dylan for the movie was Knocking on Heaven's Door. This film is worth watching just for the soundtrack on it. It's great. By all means, I don't mean that that's the only good thing in it, because I think it's a great movie. The cinematography is excellent. The acting is superb, and the music just puts it over the top. The director deliberately cast his films supporting roles with legendary Western character actors, such as Chill Wills, Katie Girardeau, Jack Elam, Slim Pickens, Barry Sullivan, Dub Taylor, R.G. Armstrong, Paul Fix, and Jason Robards. The film has a lot of faces you'll recognize. From the beginning of the production, it was plagued with difficulties. MGM President James Aubrey, for economic reasons, refused to give the director the time or the budget required that the film needed. He forced the director to rely on local crew members in the Mexican state of Durango. Multiple technical problems, including malfunctioning cameras, led to costly reshoots. Due to a bent flange on one of the cameras, all the shots made with one Panavision camera were out of focus on the right side, making that footage completely unusable. MGM had refused Peckinpah's request to have a camera mechanic on call in Durango. And because all the footage was sent back to LA for processing, the problem wasn't discovered for several weeks. MGM finally sent a camera mechanic to the set to fix the camera. By then, the film was several days over schedule and several $100,000 over budget. The MGM president objected to several scenes that he considered not needed for the film's plot. Peckinpah and his crew reportedly worked weekends and lunch hours to secretly complete these sequences. Eventually, MGM's president would send telegrams to the set complaining about the number of camera setups that the director was using and the time that he spent to shoot specific scenes. It's said that the movie set was a battleground. Christopherson and Peckinpah had several heated arguments while making the movie, and a lot of the people on the set thought that they would end up having a fight physically. Peckinpah was always very confrontational, but he did fear Christopherson, who was a former Army Airborne Ranger, and he really was afraid that Christopherson would whip his butt. As the rumors started to swirl back at the studio about Peckinpah's drinking and how it was affecting the ability of the film to get produced, strictly as a joke, they took a photograph which showed Peckinpah on a stretcher being fed whiskey through an IV bottle while cast members carried him off. I'm not sure if this was ever dispersed to the studio, but knowing Peckinpah, it probably was. This film was one of many that MGM put into a rushed release format that either did not succeed at the box office, as was the case with this movie, or that were mangled by the editing process of the studio head. He had objected to several sequences in the film, and he wanted them removed. Peckinpah fought him on it, but to no avail. But thankfully, one copy of the uncut movie, before James Aubrey's censors demolished it, had been stolen from the projection booth in the screen test room, and that allowed the uncut version that we know now to survive and be able to be shown to audiences in its intact Peckinpah form. Take a look at this exceptional Western. You can't not like this one. This is a good one. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.